The smell hit Daehyun first. It always did in these underground markets. A mix of oil, sweat, and desperation that clung to everything in Sector 7 of New Seoul Space Station. He pulled his jacket tighter and moved through the crowd, keeping his eyes down. He was here for engine parts, nothing more. Daehyun had been a military engineer once. That was before the war, before everything went wrong. Now he was just a salvage ship captain trying to keep his crew fed and his ship flying. The Wandering Star needed new coolant regulators, and the only place to find them cheap was in places like this. He walked past stalls selling stolen goods, forged documents, and weapons that would get you arrested on any civilized station. Daehyun had seen it all before. The galaxy was a harsh place, and the frontier stations were the harshest of all. People did what they had to do to survive. Looking for something special, Captain? A vendor called out to him. Daehyun shook his head and kept walking. He knew better than to make eye contact with these people. Every conversation was a trap, every deal a potential disaster. He found the parts dealer he was looking for in the back corner of the market. The transaction was quick and silent. Credits changed hands, and Daehyun got his regulators at half the legal price. No questions asked. That was how things worked down here. He was heading back to his ship when he heard the noise. A crowd was gathering near the center of the market. Daehyun told himself to keep walking. Whatever was happening there was none of his business. He had learned that lesson the hard way over the years. But curiosity won. It always did, even when he knew better. He moved closer to the crowd, careful to stay at the edges where he could slip away if needed. An auctioneer stood on a raised platform, his voice amplified by cheap speakers. Next item, gentlemen and ladies. Fresh from the outer rim. Very rare, very valuable. Daehyun felt his stomach turn. He knew what kind of auction this was. He should leave. He should walk away right now and never look back. But his feet stayed planted on the cold metal floor. Two guards dragged something onto the platform. Not something, someone. She was small, maybe 16 years old if Daehyun had to guess. Her skin had a strange pale blue tint, and faint markings covered her arms and face. They looked like tattoos at first, but as she moved under the harsh lights, Daehyun realized they were natural. Bioluminescent patterns that pulsed weakly beneath her skin. A Velen. Daehyun had heard about them. A newly discovered species from a planet 3 systems away. They were supposed to be peaceful, intelligent, and telepathic. They were also rare, which made them valuable to the wrong kind of people. The girl wore heavy metal cuffs on her wrists and ankles. Suppression cuffs designed to block alien abilities. Her clothes were torn and dirty. Bruises covered her arms. When she lifted her head, Daehyun saw the fear in her eyes. Pure absolute terror. Starting bid is 5,000 credits, the auctioneer announced. This one is young and trainable. Perfect for research facilities, private collectors, or entertainment venues. Daehyun felt sick. He knew what those words really meant. Research facilities would experiment on her. Private collectors would keep her in a cage like an exotic pet. Entertainment venues. He did not want to think about what they would do to her. The bidding started quickly. A man in an expensive suit raised his hand. 7,000 credits. A woman with cold eyes countered with 8,000. More hands went up. These people saw her as a thing to be bought and used. To them, she was not a person at all. The girl's eyes swept across the crowd. She was looking for someone, anyone who might help her. Her gaze met Daehyun's for just a second. In that moment, he saw his younger sister, Jiwoo. Sweet, innocent Jiwoo, who had died in the war 10 years ago. She had been about this age when the bombs fell. 15,000, someone shouted. The crowd laughed. That was a high price for a single slave. Daehyun's hands clenched into fists. He should walk away. He had his own crew to worry about. Bora and Taemin depended on him to make smart decisions. Spending 15,000 credits on a slave girl was not smart. It was stupid and reckless. But he kept seeing Jiwoo's face. Kept remembering how helpless he had felt when he could not save her. 16,000, Daehyun heard himself say. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the crowd. The auctioneer looked at him with interest. 16,000 from the gentleman in the back. Do I hear 17? The man in the expensive suit studied Daehyun for a moment, then nodded. 17,000. Daehyun checked his credit account on his wrist display. He had 19,000 credits total. That was supposed to cover fuel, food, and repairs for the next 3 months. If he spent it all here, his crew would be in serious trouble. The girl looked at him again. Hope flickered in her eyes, fragile as a candle flame. 19,000, Daehyun said firmly. Final offer. The crowd went silent. That was an insane amount of money for a slave, even a rare one. The expensive suit man shook his head and stepped back. The cold-eyed woman frowned but did not bid again. 19,000 going once, the auctioneer said, his voice eager. Going twice. Sold to the captain in the back. Daehyun felt numb as he pushed through the crowd to the platform. What had he just done? He had just spent every credit he had on a girl he did not know. Bora was going to kill him. Taemin would think he had lost his mind. Maybe he had. He transferred the credits from his account to the auctioneer's. The transaction went through with a soft beep. The auctioneer handed him a data chip with the girl's ownership papers and a control device for her suppression cuffs. Pleasure doing business with you, Captain, the auctioneer said with a greasy smile. I can recommend some good facilities if you need help breaking her in. The young ones can be stubborn at first. Daehyun wanted to punch the man. Instead, he took the chip and the control device and walked to where the guards held the girl. Up close, he could see she was shaking. Her bioluminescent markings had gone completely dark. Come on, he said quietly. Let's get out of here. The guards released her arms and she stumbled. Daehyun caught her before she fell. She flinched at his touch, expecting pain, but he just steadied her gently and guided her toward the exit. As they walked through the market, Daehyun felt eyes watching them. Everyone assumed they knew what he planned to do with her. They expected him to exploit her, use her, break her. That was what people did with slaves in places like this. The girl walked beside him in silence, her chains clinking with each step. She kept her head down, resigned to whatever fate awaited her. She had probably learned that hope was dangerous. Daehyun's ship was docked in Bay 12, a 20-minute walk from the market. Neither of them spoke during the journey. What was there to say? He had bought her like she was a piece of cargo. In the eyes of the law, that was exactly what she was now. When they reached the Wandering Star, Daehyun stopped at the airlock. The girl stood beside him, waiting for orders like a trained animal. It made him feel sick all over again. What's your name? He asked. She looked up at him in surprise. Clearly, no one had asked her that in a long time. Nira, she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, barely audible. I'm Daehyun, he said. Welcome aboard, Nira. I promise you things are going to be different now. She did not believe him. He could see it in her eyes. She had heard promises before and they had all been lies, but that was okay. He would show her through actions, not words. Starting now. He opened the airlock and gestured for her to enter first. She hesitated, then stepped inside his ship. Daehyun followed, sealing the door behind them. As the airlock cycled, he looked down at the control device in his hand. It could cause her pain with the press of a button. It could track her location. It could shock her unconscious if she tried to escape. Daehyun threw it in the nearest recycler and watched it turn to ash. Nira stared at him in shock. Her bioluminescent markings flickered once, twice, then glowed with a soft blue light. For the first time since he had seen her, something other than fear showed on her face. Maybe this was the stupidest decision he had ever made. Maybe his crew would mutiny when they found out what he had done. Maybe the authorities would come after him for harboring an unregistered alien. But as he looked at Nira's glowing markings and saw the first spark of hope return to her eyes, Daehyun knew he would make the same choice again. Some things mattered more than money or safety. Some things were worth the risk. Everyone expected him to exploit the alien girl, but he gave her a home instead. Tubora was waiting in the cargo bay when Daehyun brought Nira aboard. His first mate stood with her arms crossed, her expression already showing disapproval before she even knew what was happening. She had worked with Daehyun for 5 years and could read him like a book. What did you do? Bora asked flatly. Daehyun guided Nira further into the ship. The girl stayed close to him like a shadow. Her chains rattled with every step. We need to talk, he said, obviously. Bora's eyes fell on Nira, taking in the suppression cuffs, the torn clothes, and the fading bruises. Her expression softened slightly. Who is she? Her name is Nira. I bought her at an auction in the market. The temperature in the cargo bay seemed to drop 10 degrees. Bora's face went completely blank, which was always a bad sign. You did what? Taemin emerged from the engine room, wiping grease from his hands. He was younger than both of them, barely 25, and always nervous around conflict. What's going on? He asked, then saw Nira. Oh. Daehyun spent all our money on a slave, Bora said, her voice dangerously calm. 19,000 credits. Everything we had. Taemin's eyes went wide. Everything. But we need that for fuel and repairs. We have jobs lined up that require supplies. How are we supposed to— I know, Daehyun interrupted. I know it was reckless. But I couldn't leave her there. Why not? Bora demanded. Do you know how many people get sold in markets like that every day? Hundreds, thousands. You can't save them all, Daehyun. And you certainly can't save them by making us all broke. Nira shrank back, her bioluminescent markings dimming. She understood enough to know they were arguing about her, that she was a problem, that she was not wanted here. Daehyun felt a surge of protective anger. She's a kid, Bora, 16 years old, maybe younger. You saw the kind of people bidding on her. You know what they would have done. That's not our problem, Bora shot back. We're not heroes. We're barely surviving out here ourselves. One bad month and we're the ones who'll be desperate enough to do terrible things. Then maybe we should be better than that, Daehyun said quietly. Bora laughed, but there was no humor in it. Better in this galaxy? Look around, Captain. The frontier doesn't reward being better. It rewards being smart and staying alive. Taemin shifted uncomfortably. What about the legal issues? If she's unregistered, we could get arrested just for having her on board. The station authorities do random inspections. I have her ownership papers, Daehyun said. Technically, she's legal cargo. Cargo, Bora repeated. That's a hell of a way to talk about someone you just rescued. You know what I mean. The argument was interrupted by a soft sound. Nira had collapsed against the wall, her legs giving out. She was exhausted, probably had not eaten or slept properly in days, maybe weeks. Daehyun moved to help her, but she flinched away from him. The brief moment of trust from earlier had faded. Now she just looked scared again. Bora sighed, and some of the anger drained from her face. She had a hard exterior, but underneath she was not cruel. Taemin, get her some water and something to eat. Nothing too heavy. Her stomach probably can't handle much. Taemin nodded and hurried off toward the galley. Bora knelt down a few feet away from Nira, careful not to get too close. Hey, she said, her voice gentler now. Can you understand me? Nira nodded slightly. Some words, she whispered in accented universal standard. Okay, good, we're not going to hurt you. I'm angry at him, she pointed at Daehyun, not at you. Understand? Another small nod, those cuffs look painful. Can we take them off? Nira's eyes widened with something like hope, but she shook her head quickly. No, dangerous, my kind. We have abilities. Humans fear us. What kind of abilities? Bora asked. I can feel emotions, read thoughts sometimes, when I am not blocked. Nira touched the cuffs on her wrists. These stop me. Keep humans safe. Daehyun crouched down beside Bora. What if we trust you not to hurt us? Would you want them off? Nira looked at him like he was speaking a language she did not understand. Trust me? But I am property. Slaves do not get trust. You're not a slave here, Daehyun said firmly. I bought you to free you, not to own you. I don't understand. Tears welled up in Nira's eyes. Everyone wants something. What do you want from me? It was a fair question. In her experience, kindness always came with a price. Daehyun wished he could explain in a way she would believe, but words felt inadequate. Taemin returned with a bottle of water and a protein bar. He handed them to Nira carefully, like she might break. She took them with shaking hands and drank the water so fast she started coughing. Slow down, Bora said. Small sips. You'll make yourself sick. Nira obeyed, forcing herself to drink slowly. She broke off tiny pieces of the protein bar and chewed them carefully. It was clear she had been hungry for a long time. While she ate, Daehyun explained the full story. How he had gone to the market for parts. How he had stumbled onto the auction. How something inside him had broken when he saw her on that platform. She reminded me of Jiwoo, he admitted quietly. I know that's not a good reason to spend all our money. I know it was stupid. But I couldn't walk away. Bora was silent for a long moment. She had known Jiwoo too. They had all been friends before the war. Your sister would have done the same thing, she finally said. She always did have a bleeding heart for strays. So do you, Daehyun pointed out. Yeah. Well, I hide it better. Bora looked at Nira, who had finished the protein bar and was clutching the empty wrapper like it was precious. Okay, she can stay. But we need to figure out how to make money with empty accounts. We have 3 weeks before the next payment on the ship is due. If we miss that, we lose the Wandering Star. I'll figure something out, Daehyun promised. You better. Bora stood up and brushed off her pants. Taemin, help me run a system check. We might have to take some riskier jobs to make up the money quickly. Taemin nodded and followed her out. That left Daehyun alone with Nira in the cargo bay. She had stopped shaking, but she still looked fragile. Lost. Come on, Daehyun said gently. Let me show you where you can sleep. He led her through the narrow corridors of the Wandering Star. The ship was old and cramped, but it was home. He stopped at a door near his own quarters. It had been sealed for 3 years. This was my sister's room, he explained as he opened the door. She died a long time ago, but I never had the heart to clear it out. The room was small but clean. A bed, a desk, a locker for clothes. Personal items still scattered around. Books, music players, drawings taped to the walls. Evidence of a life cut short. You can stay here, Daehyun said. It's yours now if you want it. Nira stepped inside slowly like she was entering a sacred place. She touched the edge of the bed with one chained hand. This is for me? A real room? A real room, with a door that locks from the inside. You can have privacy here, safety. She turned to look at him, and her bioluminescent markings were glowing brighter now. Why? She asked again. Why do you do this? Daehyun thought about all the reasons. Because she reminded him of Jiwoo. Because it was the right thing to do. Because someone needed to stand against the cruelty of the galaxy. But in the end, he just said, because everyone deserves a home. Nira's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were different. Not fear or pain, but something else. Something that might have been gratitude. The cuffs, she said suddenly. Can you really remove them? Daehyun pulled out the key that had come with the ownership papers. If you want me to. But Nira, I need you to understand something. If I take these off, you'll have your abilities back. You could hurt us if you wanted to. You could escape. You could do whatever you choose. I'm trusting you. No one has ever trusted me before, she whispered. Well, I do. So what do you want? Nira held out her wrists. Her hands were steady now, no longer shaking. Freedom, she said simply. I want freedom. Daehyun unlocked the cuffs one by one. They fell to the floor with heavy thuds. Then he removed the ankle chains. Nira stood there, free of restraints for the first time in months. Her markings blazed with brilliant blue light that filled the small room. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. I can feel everything again, she said in wonder. Your emotions. Bora's worry. Taemin's fear. And yours. You feel guilty. Sad. But also hopeful. That sounds about right, Daehyun admitted. Nira opened her eyes and looked directly at him. You truly do not want to hurt me. I can feel it. She paused, searching for the right words. You actually care? Yeah, Daehyun said. I actually care. For the first time since he had seen her on that auction platform, Nira smiled. It was small and uncertain, but it was real. Then I will stay, she said. And I will help however I can. I promise not to hurt your crew. They are good people even when they are angry. They are, Daehyun agreed. Get some rest, Nira. We'll figure out the details tomorrow. He left her alone in Jiwoo's old room and walked back to the bridge. Bora and Taemin were already there, reviewing potential jobs on the computer screens. She okay? Bora asked without looking up. I think so. I took off her cuffs. Taemin nearly fell out of his chair. You what? Captain, she could read our minds. She could control us. Nira stood in the engine room of the Wandering Star, her hands deep in the mechanical systems that kept the ship running. Taemin watched her work with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. You're a natural at this, he said. Most people take years to understand these systems. You learned it in weeks. Nira's bioluminescent markings pulsed with pleasure at the compliment. I can feel the energy flowing through the ship, she explained. It's like hearing music. I just follow the patterns. Her universal standard had improved dramatically. She spoke with barely an accent now, though she still struggled with some idioms and expressions. Daehyun had spent hours teaching her to read and write in multiple languages. She absorbed information like a sponge, hungry for knowledge after being denied it for so long. Hand me the plasma wrench, Taemin said. Nira passed it to him before he even finished the sentence. She had sensed what he needed through her telepathic abilities. It was useful even if it sometimes felt a bit invasive. Sorry, she said quickly. I'm trying not to read thoughts without permission. But emotions are harder to block out, especially when someone feels something strongly. It's okay, Taemin assured her. I'm getting used to it. Just try not to peek when I'm thinking about embarrassing stuff. Nira laughed. It was a sound that had become more common over the past weeks. The frightened girl from the auction was still there, buried under the surface, but she was slowly being replaced by someone stronger. Someone who smiled and joked and belonged. Bora appeared in the doorway. Captain wants everyone on the bridge. We're approaching the station. They all made their way to the front of the ship. Daehyun stood at the pilot controls, guiding the wandering star toward a massive space station called Haven's Gate. It was one of the larger frontier stations, a place where all kinds of people came to trade, hide, or start over. We're here for supplies, Daehyun explained as they docked. Should be a quick trip, in and out in a few hours. But nothing was ever that simple anymore. As they walked through Haven's Gate, Nira noticed people staring at her. Most had never seen a Velen before. Some looked curious. Others looked hungry, the same way those auction bidders had looked at her. Stay close, Bora muttered, her hand resting on the weapon at her hip. She had become fiercely protective of Nira over the past months. It surprised everyone, especially Bora herself. They were in a supply shop when it happened. Nira was examining some interesting tools when three men approached her. They were rough-looking, the kind of people who made their living in the gray areas of the law. Hey there, pretty thing, one of them said. What's a rare specimen like you doing walking around free? Nira froze. Her markings dimmed. Old fears rushed back. Daehyun stepped between her and the men immediately. She's with me. Move along. With you? The man laughed. You got papers for her? Registration? Or did you just steal some corporation's property? I have all the legal documents I need, Daehyun said coldly. Now leave us alone. The man leaned closer and Nira could smell alcohol on his breath. I bet she'd fetch a good price if someone reported her to the Drexel Consortium. They've been looking for lost Velens, offering rewards. Bora's weapon was out in a flash, pressed against the man's ribs. He said, "Move along," she growled. The tension was thick enough to cut. Other shoppers backed away, not wanting to get involved. The three men sized up their chances and apparently decided it was not worth the risk. They left, but not before the leader gave Nira one last calculating look. We need to leave, Taemin said urgently. Now. They rushed back to the ship, Nira practically running to keep up. Once they were safely aboard with the airlock sealed, she finally allowed herself to break down. She sank to the floor of the cargo bay, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. I'm putting you all in danger just by being here. Daehyun knelt beside her. You have nothing to apologize for. But those men, they're right. The Drexel Consortium wants Velens back. They're the ones who raided my planet, who killed my family. If they find out I'm here, they won't, Bora said firmly. We'll keep you safe. How? Nira looked up at them with desperate eyes. How can you protect me from a whole corporation? They have ships, weapons, money. You're just 3 people with one old ship. It was a good question. The Drexel Consortium was one of the largest corporations in this sector. They specialized in alien acquisitions, which was a polite term for kidnapping and enslaving newly discovered species. If they were actively looking for Velens, Nira was in serious danger. Then we need to be smarter than them, Daehyun said. We'll avoid stations where they have a strong presence. We'll keep a low profile, and we'll be ready to run if necessary. Over the next weeks, they developed a new routine. Nira stayed on the ship during station visits. She learned every system on the Wandering Star until she could operate it as well as any of them. She also began training with Bora in self-defense. You need to know how to fight, Bora explained during their first session. Not because we expect you to fight, but because you should never feel helpless again. Nira proved to be a quick learner. Her telepathic abilities gave her an edge. She could sense what Bora was about to do before she did it. It was not quite mind-reading, but it was close enough to be useful. Good, Bora said after Nira successfully dodged a series of attacks. Remember, it's not about being the strongest. It's about being smart and fast and never giving up. Like you, Nira said with admiration. Bora smiled, something she rarely did. Yeah, like me. During quiet moments, Daehyun continued Nira's education. He taught her about human history, culture, and politics. She was particularly fascinated by art and music. On my world, we created with light, she explained one evening. Watch. She placed her hand against the wall of the ship. Her bioluminescent markings began to glow. and patterns of light spread across the metal surface. They moved and swirled like living things, creating images of her homeworld. Beautiful forests, strange architecture, people with glowing markings like hers. That's incredible, Daehyun breathed. It fades after a while, Nira said. But while it lasts, it's like having a piece of home with me. She started creating light art throughout the ship. Patterns on the walls, images on the ceiling. The wandering star began to look less like a cold machine and more like a home. Even Taemin, who initially had been scared of Nira, found himself looking forward to seeing what she would create next. But the peace could not last forever. One night, Bora was reviewing news feeds when she found something that made her blood run cold. "Daehyun," she called out. "You need to see this." The news report was from a major network. The headline read, "Drexel Consortium increases rewards for Velen recovery." There was a video of a corporate spokesman explaining that any Velens found in human space should be reported immediately. They were offering 100,000 credits per specimen. "They're not even calling them people," Taemin said in disgust. "Specimens, like they're animals." Nira watched the video with a blank expression. "They want us for our abilities," she said quietly. "Velens can do things humans cannot. We can sense lies, read emotions, sometimes influence thoughts. Corporations would pay fortunes for that kind of power." "Is that what they did to your people?" Daehyun asked gently. Nira nodded. "They came to our planet saying they wanted to trade. We welcomed them. We were peaceful, naive. Then they attacked, took thousands of us. Those who resisted were killed. I watched my parents die trying to protect me." She touched the faint scar on her arm. "I was taken to a research facility. They did experiments, tried to understand how our abilities worked. When I fought back, they put me in the suppression cuffs and sold me." The room was silent. There were no words adequate to respond to that kind of trauma. "We'll keep you safe," Daehyun promised again. "Whatever it takes." But that promise became harder to keep when they started noticing things. Ships following them through hyperspace. Questions from station authorities that seemed too specific. Someone was tracking them. "We need to change our patterns," Bo-Ra said during a crew meeting. "Stop taking regular routes. Use fake IDs. Maybe even change the ship's identification tags." "That's all illegal," Taemin pointed out. "So is harboring an unregistered alien if you want to get technical," Bo-Ra shot back. "We're already breaking laws. Might as well break the ones that keep us alive." They also started helping others. Word had spread through underground networks about the ship that had rescued a slave girl. Other refugees began reaching out asking for help. Escaped slaves, persecuted aliens, people running from corporations or governments. Taehyun wanted to help them all, but they simply did not have the resources. Instead, they did what they could. Gave information about safe routes. Connected people with other helpers. Transported refugees when it was on their way. "We're starting a movement without meaning to," Bo-Ra observed one day. "Other ships are following our example, helping instead of exploiting." "Good," Daehyun said. "The galaxy needs more of that." Nira thrived in this environment. Having a purpose beyond mere survival gave her strength. She used her abilities to help screen refugees, making sure they were not spies or threats. She could sense desperation, hope, and honesty in ways that sensors never could. Everyone expected him to exploit the alien girl, but he gave her a home. Instead, Part 4 Kwon-sik studied the security footage for the third time. The image quality was poor, but he could clearly see the Velen girl walking through Haven's Gate Station. She stayed close to a man the database identified as Daehyun, captain of a registered salvage vessel called the Wandering Star. "Too easy," Kwon-sik muttered to himself. The Drexel Consortium was paying him 50,000 credits to capture this girl, with a bonus if he delivered her undamaged. For that kind of money, he had expected a more challenging hunt. He had been tracking ships for 15 years, started in military special operations, then went private when he realized corporations paid better than governments. He was good at his job because he never let emotions get involved. Targets were just targets. It did not matter if they were criminals or innocents. Someone wanted them found, and he found them. The girl was just another job. Kwon-sik pulled up the travel records for the Wandering Star. They were heading to Outpost Sejong, a small mining colony on the edge of mapped space. Perfect. Remote outposts had minimal security and even less surveillance. He could grab the girl and be gone before anyone noticed. He assembled his team. 3 mercenaries he had worked with before. Reliable, quiet, and willing to do whatever the job required. They loaded their ship with suppression technology, stun weapons, and enough firepower to handle any resistance. The target is a Velen female, approximately 16 years old, Quan-Sik briefed his team. She has telepathic abilities, so we use the suppression field as soon as we're in range. The captain and his crew are secondary targets. Eliminate them if they resist. What if they surrender? One mercenary asked. Then we tie them up and leave them. This isn't about them, just the girl. Meanwhile, the wandering star was approaching outpost Sejong, completely unaware of the danger. The crew was in good spirits. They had just completed a successful salvage operation and had enough credits to keep flying for another 2 months. Nira was on the bridge with Dae-hyun, looking at the view screen. A massive nebula dominated the space ahead, swirling with colors that reminded her of home. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Want to see it up close?" Dae-hyun asked. "The outpost has an observation deck. Best view in the sector." Nira's markings glowed with excitement. She rarely got to leave the ship anymore, but outpost Sejong was so remote that the risk seemed minimal. "Really? Can we?" "Don't see why not. Bora, you have the bridge. Nira and I are going sightseeing." Bora looked up from her console. "Be careful, and keep your comm open." They docked at the outpost and made their way through the small station. It was a rougher place than Haven's Gate, mostly populated by miners and traders. But it had a casual friendliness that the bigger stations lacked. People here minded their own business. The observation deck was almost empty. Just a few people scattered around, staring out at the nebula. Dae-hyun and Nira found a quiet corner where they could talk without being overheard. "I've been thinking," Nira said, her voice hesitant, "about the future. What about it? What happens when the consortium finds me? Not if, when. They're looking, and eventually they'll succeed. What happens to you and the crew then?" Dae-hyun was quiet for a moment. He had thought about this too, more than he wanted to admit. "We'll deal with it when it happens. That's not a plan. That's hope." Nira turned to face him. "Maybe I should leave. Find somewhere remote to hide. That way you'd be safe." "No," Dae-hyun said firmly. "We're family now. Family doesn't abandon each other when things get hard. But I'm putting you in danger. Everyone we help puts us in danger. That's the choice we made." He put a hand on her shoulder. "Nira, you've become important to all of us. Not because of what you can do or what you're worth to some corporation. Because of who you are." Tears formed in Nira's eyes. "I was property for so long. Sometimes I forget that I'm allowed to be a person. You were always a person. The people who treated you as property were wrong. Not just morally wrong, but wrong about the fundamental truth of what you are." They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the nebula swirl. Nira felt safe for the first time in her life. Truly safe. She had a home, a family, and a future that extended beyond mere survival. She should have known it was too good to last. Back on the wandering star, Taemin was running routine maintenance when he noticed something odd in the sensor logs. A ship had been following them at a distance for the past 3 days. Always just out of visual range, but close enough to track their movements. "Bora," he called out. "Come look at this." Bora studied the data with growing concern. "That's a hunter ship. Damn it, we've been made." She tried to contact Dae-hyun, but something was blocking the communications. An interference field had been activated around the outpost. That was when she knew they were in immediate danger. "Taemin, seal the ship and warm up the engines. We need to get the captain and Nira back here now." But it was already too late. Quan-Sik and his team had landed and were moving through the outpost. They knew exactly where their targets were. The observation deck had limited exits. Perfect for an ambush. Nira felt it first. A wave of hostile intent washed over her telepathic senses. "Something's wrong," she said suddenly. "Someone's coming. Someone dangerous." Dae-hyun immediately went on alert. "We need to get back to the ship." They moved quickly toward the exit but found their path blocked by 2 armed men. Behind them 2 more appeared. They were surrounded. Quan-Sik stepped forward, a suppression field generator in his hand. "Captain Dae-hyun, the Velen girl. This doesn't have to be difficult. Just hand her over and you can walk away." "Not happening," Dae-hyun said, positioning himself between Nira and the bounty hunter. "I was afraid you'd say that." Quan-Sik activated the suppression field. Nira cried out as her abilities were suddenly cut off. It felt like losing a sense, like going blind or deaf. The world became smaller, darker. "Run!" Dae-hyun shouted, pushing Nira toward a side corridor. But the mercenaries were fast. One of them tackled Nira before she could escape. She fought back, using the self-defense techniques Bo-Ra had taught her, but she was outnumbered and outmatched. Dae-hyun fought like a man possessed, but he was one person against 4 trained killers. A stun blast caught him in the chest and he went down hard. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was Nira being dragged away, her terrified eyes locked on his. When he woke up, he was on the floor of the observation deck. Station security was there along with Bo-Ra and Tae-min. His whole body ached from the stun blast. "Nira," he gasped. "Where's Nira?" Bo-Ra's expression told him everything. They took her. Professional snatch and grab. By the time we realized what was happening, they were already gone. Dae-hyun struggled to his feet, ignoring the pain. "We need to go after them." "We are," Tae-min said. He was working on a portable computer. "I managed to tag their ship with a tracker before they left. I'm following their trajectory now." "Where are they going?" "Looks like they're heading for the consortium processing station in the Kalos system. That's where they take all their acquisitions before shipping them to research facilities." Dae-hyun felt rage building inside him. Pure, focused rage unlike anything he had felt since the war. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 48 hours before they reach the station. After that, she disappears into the consortium system. We'll never find her." Bo-Ra checked her weapons. "Then we have 48 hours to get her back." "This is insane," Tae-min said, though he was already plotting a course. "We're talking about attacking a consortium convoy. They'll have military-grade escorts, weapons, the works. We'll be outgunned and outnumbered." "I don't care," Dae-hyun said flatly. "We're getting her back." "I figured you'd say that." Bo-Ra pulled up a communication screen. "I've been making some calls. Remember all those people we helped over the past months? Refugees, smugglers, other crews. Turns out they remember us too." She showed him a list of ships. Almost a dozen captains had agreed to help. They did not have much, but they had numbers and determination. "The ship that helps," one message read. "Now we help you." Dae-hyun felt something loosen in his chest. They were not alone in this fight. "Coordinate with them. We'll need a plan." Over the next hours, they plotted out an attack strategy. It was desperate and dangerous and probably suicidal. But it was a chance, and that was all they had. Dae-hyun stood on the bridge, staring at the stars. Somewhere out there, Nira was scared and alone. He remembered the day he bought her at that auction. How small and broken she had looked. How far she had come since then. He remembered her smile, her laugh, her determination to help others despite her own trauma. He remembered calling her family and meaning it. "Hold on, Nira," he whispered. "We're coming for you." On the bounty hunter's ship, Nira sat in a holding cell. The suppression field made everything feel numb and distant. She could not sense emotions, could not reach out with her mind. She was alone inside her own head in a way she had not been since they removed her cuffs. Kwon-sik watched her through the cell's window. She looked small and defeated, all the fight gone out of her. Good. That would make the delivery easier. "You should have stayed hidden," he said. "Your captain made a mistake bringing you out in public." Nira looked. Everyone expected him to exploit the alien girl. But he gave her a home instead. Part 5. The asteroid field was perfect for an ambush. Massive rocks floating in space, some as large as cities. Plenty of places to hide ships and wait for prey to wander through. Dae-hyun stood on the bridge of the Wandering Star, surrounded by tactical displays. 11 other ships hung in space around them, hidden behind asteroids. Smugglers, refugee runners, independent traders, people who owed Dae-hyun favors or simply believed in what he was doing. "Convoy should be here in 20 minutes, Bo-Ra reported. She had taken command of the tactical operations. 3 escort ships, 1 prisoner transport, all consortium military vessels with heavy shields and weapons. And we have 12 civilian ships with whatever guns we could strap on," Tae-min added nervously. "This is going to be close." "Close is better than impossible," Dae-hyun said. "Everyone knows the plan?" Bo-Ra opened a channel to the other ships. "Final check. Group Alpha, you're with me. We hit the left escort. Group Beta, take the right. Group Gamma, you're on suppression duty. Keep their communications jammed so they can't call for reinforcements." Acknowledgements came back from each ship. These were not trained soldiers. They were ordinary people who had decided that some things were worth fighting for. Worth dying for, if necessary. Dae-hyun thought about Nira, wondered if she knew they were coming. If she still had hope or if the past 2 days had broken her spirit again. "Incoming," Bo-Ra announced. Here we go. The consortium convoy appeared on sensors. 4 ships moving in tight formation, completely unaware of the trap ahead. They probably thought they were safe out here. The convoy routes were supposed to be secret. They did not know that Taimin had spent the last 2 days hacking into station records, bribing information brokers and piecing together where the convoy would pass. The kid was a genius when he needed to be. Wait for it, Bo-Ra said as the convoy entered the asteroid field. Wait. The prisoner transport was in the center of the formation, protected by the escort ships on 3 sides. Getting to it would mean going through heavily armed military vessels. But they had one advantage: desperation. Now, Bo-Ra shouted. 12 ships burst from behind the asteroids, weapons firing. The element of surprise was total. The escort ships scrambled to respond, but they had been caught completely off guard. Group Alpha focused fire on the left escort. Missiles and plasma bolts slammed into its shields. The consortium ship was tough, but it was 1 ship against 4. Its shield started to fail under the sustained barrage. The right escort turned to engage Group Beta, and suddenly space was filled with weapons fire and explosions. An asteroid shattered from a missed shot, sending debris everywhere. The wandering star went straight for the prisoner transport. That ship had shields but minimal weapons. It was designed to carry cargo, not fight battles. Bo-Ra piloted through the chaos with reckless skill, dodging return fire and flying between asteroids at speeds that made Taimin clutch his console. We need to disable their engines without destroying the ship, Daehyun said. Nira's in there. I know, Bo-Ra said through gritted teeth. She lined up a shot and fired at the transport's engine section. The blast was precise, taking out the engine without breaching the hull. The transport began to drift powerless, but the 3rd escort ship was moving to intercept them. It was bigger than the others, probably the convoy commander's ship. Its weapons were charging up for a killing shot. We've got a problem, Taimin warned. The problem solved itself when 3 ships from Group Gamma suddenly appeared, putting themselves between the wandering star and the big escort. They fired everything they had, and while their weapons barely scratched the escort's shields, they bought precious seconds. One of those ships took a direct hit. It exploded in a ball of fire, and 6 people died in an instant. People Daehyun had spoken to just hours before. People who had families, dreams, and lives. Keep moving, Bo-Ra said quietly. She felt every death. But emotion was a luxury they could not afford right now. They reached the prisoner transport and matched its drift. Daehyun was already in the cargo bay, suited up for space. I'm going over. Be fast, Bo-Ra said. We can't hold them off forever. Daehyun opened the airlock and jumped across the gap between ships. He fired a tether that magnetically attached to the transport's hull, then pulled himself across. Behind him, the battle continued to rage. More ships were taking damage. They were holding, but barely. He found an access hatch and used a plasma cutter to burn through. The hatch gave way with a hiss of escaping air. Daehyun climbed inside, weapon ready. The interior was dark and cold. Emergency lights cast everything in red. He moved through the corridors, checking each cell. Most were empty. A few held other prisoners, aliens he did not recognize. He would free them all if he could. But first he needed to find Nira. Kwon-Sik was waiting for him. The bounty hunter stepped out from a side corridor, weapon trained on Daehyun. I wondered if you'd actually come. Most people would have written her off as a loss. Most people are cowards, Daehyun said. Or realists. Kwon-Sik did not fire. You know you're going to die here, right? Even if you somehow get past me, my team, and the consortium escorts, they'll hunt you forever. This girl isn't worth that. To you, maybe. To me, she's family. Kwon-Sik's expression flickered with something. Pain, maybe, or memory. I used to think like you. Believed in helping people, making a difference. The galaxy taught me better. Then the galaxy is wrong, Daehyun said simply. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Kwon-Sik made his move, bringing his weapon up to fire. But Daehyun was already moving, diving to the side and returning fire in one smooth motion. The fight was brutal and close. They were both trained fighters, both desperate to win. They crashed through the narrow corridors, trading blows and shots. Kwon-Sik was faster, but Daehyun was fueled by absolute determination. A hard punch sent Daehyun reeling. He tasted blood. Kwon-Sik raised his weapon for a finishing shot. Then Nira screamed. Not a sound. A psychic scream that tore through the suppression field through sheer force of will. Both men staggered from the mental assault. But Daehyun recovered first. He tackled Kwansik and they went down in a tangle. They fought hand to hand, neither willing to give up. Finally, Daehyun got Kwansik in a chokehold. He could kill him right now. End the threat. But he thought about Nira, about the lessons they had been teaching each other, about being better than the cruelty of the galaxy. He loosened his grip just enough. You can choose differently, he said. The galaxy doesn't have to win. Kwansik went limp. Whether from unconsciousness or surrender, Daehyun could not tell. He did not wait to find out. He found the control panel and unlocked all the cells. Nira stumbled out of her cell, still wearing suppression cuffs. Her face lit up when she saw him. I knew you'd come, she said, her voice rough from disuse. Always, Daehyun said. He used Kwansik's key to remove her cuffs. The moment they came off, Nira's markings blazed with brilliant light. Her telepathic abilities flooded back. The others, she said, sensing the prisoners in nearby cells. We have to help them. No time, Daehyun said. But Nira was already moving, helping the other prisoners. She could sense their fear, their hope. She could not leave them. Daehyun helped her. Together they freed 7 other prisoners, aliens from different species, all scheduled for delivery to consortium facilities, all of them terrified and grateful. This way, Daehyun said, leading them toward the access hatch. But Kwansik's mercenaries had regrouped. They blocked the path, weapons raised. Nira stepped forward. Her eyes were glowing now and her markings pulsed with power. Let us pass, she said, her voice echoing with telepathic force. The mercenaries hesitated. They felt her abilities pushing at their minds, making them question their orders. One of them lowered his weapon. Then another. They were just hired guns. They were not willing to die for a job. They stepped aside. Daehyun led the group to the hatch and out into space. The wandering star was waiting, airlock open. One by one, the prisoners jumped across the gap and were pulled to safety. Nira went last. As she jumped, she looked back at the transport ship. Kwansik was there watching from a window. Their eyes met for a brief moment. He raised his hand in what might have been a wave or a salute. Then Nira was across and Bora was sealing the airlock. Everyone's aboard, Daehyun shouted. Get us out of here. Bora did not need to be told twice. She fired the engines and the wandering star shot away from the convoy. The other ships in their fleet began to retreat as well, still fighting but pulling back. They had lost 3 ships. 15 people dead, many more wounded, but they had won. Against all odds, they had actually won. The consortium escorts tried to pursue, but they were too damaged. The convoy commander made a choice. Let the prisoners go or risk losing everything chasing them into an asteroid field. He chose survival. Hours later, after they had jumped to hyperspace and were safely away, the crew finally allowed themselves to breathe. The rescued prisoners were being treated in the medical bay. Most of them were in shock but alive. Nira found Daehyun in his quarters. He was sitting on his bed staring at nothing. The adrenaline had worn off and now the reality of 3 months of running. 3 months of hiding in unmapped systems using false identification codes and never staying in one place too long. The wandering star had become a ghost ship, appearing only long enough to refuel before vanishing again. But something unexpected was happening. The story of their rescue had spread through underground networks. People were talking about the ship that attacked a consortium convoy to save slaves. Other crews started copying their tactics. More refugees found freedom. A movement was growing. Nira stood in what they now called the Operations Center, a section of the cargo bay converted into a communications hub. Screens showed messages from dozens of sources, escaped slaves asking for help, sympathetic station workers offering safe havens, other ships coordinating rescue efforts. We're becoming something bigger than ourselves, she said to Bora, who was sorting through the messages. Yeah, and that makes us an even bigger target, Bora replied. But there was pride in her voice. They were making a difference even if it cost them safety. Daehyun entered the room, followed by Taemin. They had been checking the ship's systems. The wandering star was showing her age. Constant running had worn down engines and systems faster than they could repair them. We need to talk, Daehyun said. All of us. It's time to make a decision. They gathered around a table that had once held cargo containers. Now it was their meeting space. The 7 aliens they had rescued months ago had since found safe places to hide, but new refugees constantly cycled through their ship. We can't keep running forever, Daehyun began. The ship is breaking down. We're almost out of money, and the consortium is getting better at tracking us. They nearly caught us at that last refueling station. So what are you proposing? Bora asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. Daehyun looked at Nira. She has an idea. I think we should hear it. Nira took a deep breath. Over the past month, she had changed dramatically. Her hair had grown longer, and she wore practical clothes like the rest of the crew. Her bioluminescent markings were brighter now, showing her growing confidence, but the biggest change was in her eyes. They held determination instead of fear. We go public, Nira said. We tell everyone what the consortium is doing. Record testimonies from refugees show the galaxy the truth about the slave trade. Taemin shook his head immediately. That's suicide. The moment we broadcast anything, they'll trace the signal and come for us. Probably, Nira agreed. But we can't hide forever. And while we hide, thousands more suffer. Maybe it's time to stop running and start fighting properly. Fighting with what? Bora demanded. We're 3 people and a broken ship. The consortium has armies, money, political power. What do we have? The truth, Nira said simply. And people are hungry for it. Most humans don't know what's really happening out here on the frontier. They think the consortium is a legitimate business. They don't see the auctions, the suppression cuffs, the experiments. If we show them, they might not care, Bora interrupted. People are good at ignoring inconvenient truths. Some will, Daehyun said, but not all. There are good people in the galaxy. We've met them. If even a fraction of them stand up against this, it could change everything. The debate continued for hours. Taemin worried about the technical challenges of broadcasting across multiple systems simultaneously. Bora pointed out the risks and dangers. But slowly, reluctantly, they began to agree that Nira was right. They could not keep running. They had to take a stand. I know someone who can help, Bora said finally. Hanul. She's an underground journalist who exposes corporate crimes. If anyone can get this story out there, it's her. They contacted Hanul through encrypted channels. She was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for fearless reporting. When she heard what they wanted to do, she was immediately interested. I've been trying to expose the consortium for years, she said over the video call. But I needed evidence, testimony from actual victims. This could be exactly what we need. They spent the next weeks preparing. Hanul guided them through recording interviews. Nira told her story first, speaking directly to the camera. She described her planet, her family, the raid that destroyed everything. She showed her scars. She explained what the suppression cuffs felt like. They treated us like animals, she said, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. They studied us, bought and sold us, and convinced themselves it was acceptable because we were not human. But we feel pain. We love, we hope. We're people just like you. Other refugees added their voices. Aliens from a dozen different species, all with similar stories. Capture, torture, slavery. The consortium's crimes were laid bare. They also interviewed the crews of other ships who had joined the resistance. Former consortium employees who had quit in disgust. Station workers who had witnessed auctions. Each testimony added weight to the evidence. Hanul helped them compile everything into a devastating documentary. It was 2 hours of pure truth, impossible to ignore or dismiss. Once we release this, there's no going back, she warned. The consortium will come after all of us with everything they have. Good, Nira said. Let them try. The galaxy needs to see who they really are. They chose their moment carefully. A major galactic summit was happening, with representatives from dozens of human colonies and governments. The perfect audience. Hanul had connections in the summit's technical staff. They would hijack the broadcast signal and replace the scheduled programming with their documentary. Every major colony would see it simultaneously. The night before the broadcast, the crew of the Wandering Star gathered one last time. They knew this might be their last peaceful moment. Tomorrow they would become the most wanted criminals in human space. Or they would become heroes, or both. I just want to say, Daehyun began, that I'm proud of all of you. We started this journey trying to save one girl. Now we're trying to save thousands. That matters. You saved me first, Nira said. Everything that happens tomorrow comes from that choice. One act of kindness that rippled out and changed everything. The next day they executed the plan. Hanul's contact hijacked the broadcast signal. Suddenly, instead of boring political speeches, Viewers across human space saw Nira's face. "My name is Nira," she began. "I am a Velen from the planet Vela Prime, and I am here to tell you about the greatest crime humanity is committing in the galaxy." For 2 hours, the documentary played. Governments tried to shut it down, but Hanul had built-in redundancies. It kept broadcasting, kept spreading. People recorded it and shared it on private networks. Within hours, billions had seen it. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Some people denied it, called it propaganda, but many more were shocked and outraged. Protests erupted on core worlds. Politicians who had accepted consortium money found themselves investigated. The public demanded answers. The consortium responded with denials and legal threats. They called Nira a liar and a terrorist. They put bounties on everyone involved in the broadcast. But the damage was done. The truth was out there, and it could not be taken back. "We did it," Taemin said in amazement as they watched the news coverage. "People are actually listening." But the victory came with a price. The consortium sent everything they had to find the wandering star. Military ships, bounty hunters, assassins. The crew had to run again, but this time they were not alone. Ships across the galaxy started declaring themselves as part of the resistance. The movement that had started with one rescue had become something massive. People were fighting back. "We're winning," Nira said as she watched the news. "Not completely, not yet. But we're winning." Bora was less optimistic. "We're also being hunted by half the galaxy. Don't celebrate until we're actually safe." "Will we ever be safe?" Taemin asked. "Probably not," Daehyun admitted. But that was never the point. The point was to make things better, even if it cost us. Weeks passed and the political pressure on the consortium grew. The Galactic Council, humanity's central government, announced a formal investigation. It was not perfect justice, but it was a start. Some governments issued arrest warrants for Daehyun and his crew. Others quietly let it be known that they would not actively pursue them. Public opinion was divided, but shifting in their favor. "We need to keep going," Nira said during one of their strategy meetings. "The broadcast was just the beginning. We need to keep helping refugees, keep exposing the truth, keep fighting." "Agreed," Bora said. "But we need help. We can't do this alone anymore." That was when they received an unexpected message. It was from Kwansik, the bounty hunter who had captured Nira months before. The message was simple. "You were right. The galaxy doesn't have to win. If you're still fighting, I want to help. I have skills you need and debts to pay. Let me make things right." The crew debated whether to trust him. Bora argued against it. Taemin was nervous. But Nira surprised them all. "I can sense his emotions through the video," she said. "He means it. He's changed. People can change." They took a risk and agreed to meet. Kwansik brought information about consortium operations, safe routes, and contacts. He also brought something more valuable: hope. If someone like him could change, maybe others could too. The resistance continued to grow. The Galactic Council chambers were massive. Tall ceilings, polished floors, and hundreds of seats where representatives from across human space gathered to make decisions about the future. Nira had never imagined she would stand here, but here she was. 6 months had passed since the broadcast. 6 months of chaos, investigation, and slow, painful progress. The consortium had not been destroyed, but it had been damaged. Regulations were being written. Enforcement was being strengthened. It was not perfect justice, but it was something. Now Nira stood before the council to testify officially. Security guards surrounded her, not to protect the council from her, but to protect her from potential threats. She wore formal clothes that Bora had helped her pick out. Her bioluminescent markings glowed steadily, visible to everyone in the chamber. "Please state your name for the record," the council speaker said. "My name is Nira. I am a Velen from the planet Vela Prime. I am 17 years old, and I am here to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves." She told her story again. But this time it was different. This was not an underground broadcast or a secret interview. This was official testimony that would become part of galactic law. Her words would have weight and power. She described the raid on her planet in detail. The consortium ships arriving under false pretenses. The weapons that killed her parents. The suppression cuffs that made her feel less than alive. The auction where she was sold like property. "And then," she said, her voice growing stronger, "I was bought by a man named Daehyun. Everyone assumed he would exploit me. Use me, break me. But instead he gave me something I thought I had lost forever. He gave me a home. Daehyun, Bora, and Taiman sat in the gallery watching. They had been granted provisional immunity to testify, but they were still technically fugitives. This could all be a trap, but they had decided it was worth the risk. The council questioned Nira for hours. Some were sympathetic. Others were skeptical, clearly influenced by consortium money. But she answered every question with calm honesty. She did not exaggerate or dramatize. She just told the truth. When she finished, the council called other witnesses. Former consortium employees who confirmed the slave trade, station workers who had seen the auctions, scientists who had studied captured aliens without consent. The evidence piled up, undeniable and damning. Finally, they called Daehyun to testify. He walked to the center of the chamber, very aware of all the eyes watching him. He was just a salvage ship captain. He did not belong in a place like this. But he was here anyway. "Captain Daehyun," the speaker said, "you initiated this entire situation by purchasing a sentient being at an illegal auction. Do you deny this?" "No," Daehyun said. "I don't deny it. I bought her because leaving her there would have meant condemning her to torture and death. I would make the same choice again. You then harbored an unregistered alien, attacked a corporate convoy, and distributed propaganda designed to damage a legitimate business. These are serious crimes." "The consortium is not a legitimate business," Daehyun said firmly. "They are slavers hiding behind corporate paperwork. And yes, I attacked them. I would attack anyone who tried to enslave innocent people. That's not a crime. That's basic human decency." Murmurs ran through the chamber. Some agreed with him. Others were outraged by his defiance. "You cost 15 people their lives in that attack," another council member said. "How do you justify that?" Daehyun's expression hardened. "I don't. Those deaths are on my conscience, and they always will be. But those people chose to fight. They knew the risks, and they decided that freeing slaves was worth dying for. I honor their choice even as I mourn their loss." The questioning continued, but Daehyun never backed down. He admitted what he had done. He explained why he had done it. He made no apologies for standing against cruelty. When he returned to his seat, Bora leaned over and whispered, "That was either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both," Daehyun admitted. The council deliberated for 3 days. During that time, Nira and the crew waited in a secure facility. They were not prisoners exactly, but they were not free to leave either. "What do you think will happen?" Taemin asked nervously. "Best case, they rule in our favor and actually enforce anti-slavery laws," Bora said. "Worst case, we end up in prison for the rest of our lives." "There are worse things than prison," Nira said quietly. "At least we tried. At least we made them see the truth." On the 3rd day, they were summoned back to the chambers. The council had reached its decision. The speaker stood before the packed gallery. "This council has reviewed all evidence regarding the actions of the Drexel Consortium and related entities. We find substantial proof of illegal slavery operations, torture, and crimes against sentient beings." A wave of emotion swept through the chamber. Some people cheered. Others protested. "The consortium will face fines totaling 5 billion credits. Their leadership will be investigated and criminal charges will be filed where appropriate. New regulations governing the treatment of newly discovered species will be implemented immediately." It was something, but it was not enough. The consortium would survive. Some executives would escape justice. The system was too entrenched to dismantle completely, but it was progress. "Regarding the actions of Captain Daehyun and his crew," the speaker continued, "this council recognizes that their methods were illegal, but their motivations were just. In light of the greater crimes they exposed and considering the public sentiment, all charges against them are hereby dismissed." Daehyun felt like he could breathe for the first time in months. They were free. Actually free. "However," the speaker added, "we also recognize that the work they began must continue. Therefore, this council is authorizing the creation of a galactic refugee protection fleet. This fleet will have legal authority to rescue and protect displaced sentient beings across known space." Nira's eyes widened. A legal protection fleet. It was more than they had dared to hope for. "We are offering Captain Daehyun command of this fleet if he will accept it." The chamber erupted in noise. Some people loved the idea, others hated it. But the council had made its decision. Later, in a private meeting room, Nira and the crew discussed the offer. It's everything we've been fighting for, Taman said. Official support, resources, legal authority. We could actually make a real difference. But we would be working for the government, Bora pointed out. Following their rules, taking their orders. We would lose our independence. Daehyun looked at Nira. What do you think? Nira was quiet for a moment. Over the past year, she had grown from a terrified slave into a confident young woman. But she was still young, still learning who she wanted to be. I think, she said slowly, that we have a chance to save thousands of people. Maybe millions. Yes, there will be rules and compromises. Yes, it will be frustrating working within the system. But the alternative is going back to hiding and running, and I'm tired of hiding. She stood and faced all of them. I want to lead this fleet. Not as property, not as a victim, but as someone who survived and chose to fight back. I want other refugees to see me and know that they can survive too. That they can be more than what was done to them. You want to lead it? Bora asked in surprise. With Daehyun's help, Nira said quickly. And yours and Taemin's. I can't do this alone. But I think I should be the face of it. A former slave leading a rescue fleet. That sends a message. Daehyun smiled. You've come a long way from that auction platform. We all have, Nira said. So what do you say? Will you help me do this? They voted, and it was unanimous. They would accept the council's offer and build the refugee fleet together. Over the next month, ships began to gather. Some were donated by governments. Others were seized consortium vessels. Many were independent ships whose crews volunteered to join the cause. Within 6 months, they had over 50 ships. Hwan-sik brought his expertise in tactics and security. Other rescued refugees joined as translators, counselors, and advocates. Hanul continued reporting on their efforts, keeping public attention focused on the issue. The Wandering Star became the flagship. They upgraded her engines, reinforced her hull, and installed better communication systems. She was still an old ship, but she was their ship. Home. Nira stood on the bridge wearing the uniform of a fleet commander. It felt strange but right. Beside her, Daehyun wore a similar uniform with captain's insignia. Bora commanded tactical operations. Taemin ran engineering. First mission is ready, Bora reported. Distress signal from a transport ship. They're carrying refugees trying to escape consortium territory. How far? Nira asked. 6 hours at maximum speed. We can make it before the consortium intercepts them. Nira looked at Daehyun. Ready? Always, he said with a smile. That's what we do. We answer the call. Nira gave the order, and the Wandering Star jumped to hyperspace. Behind them, the rest of the fleet followed. 50 ships carrying people who had decided that compassion was stronger than profit, that justice mattered more than convenience, that every life had value. As they traveled through hyperspace, Nira thought about her journey. She had been property, then a refugee, then family, then a fighter. Now she was a leader. But underneath all those labels, she was just Nira, a Velen,